The iron bit into Sarah's wrists like frozen teeth. She'd stopped fighting the chains 3 hours ago, or maybe it had been 4. Time moved differently in the dark, in the cold belly of the Cresthaven estate, where even the moonlight refused to crawl. Above her, the floorboards groaned with the weight of celebration. Drums pounded in rhythm with her racing heart. Voices rose in a language she didn't understand, guttural and ancient, calling to something that lived in blood and bone. The Luna ceremony, the choosing of the Alpha King's mate. And Sarah was going to die down here while it happened. She leaned her head back against the stone wall, feeling the damp seep through her thin dress. They'd taken everything else, her jacket, her shoes, even the small silver locket her grandmother had pressed into her palm the night before she disappeared. "Run," Gran had whispered, her fingers trembling. "Run before they remember what you are." But Sarah hadn't run fast enough. The Cresthaven pack had found her at the border, crossing into what she'd thought was just another forgotten stretch of Washington wilderness. She'd been hiking toward the coast, toward anonymity, toward a life that didn't involve whispered warnings and knowing looks from neighbors who'd watched her grow up strange, different, wrong. The warriors who dragged her from the tree line hadn't asked questions. They'd known her scent, somehow. Known what it meant. Heretic blood. Above, the drums stopped. Sarah's breath caught. In the sudden silence, she could hear her own pulse thundering in her ears, could feel the ancient stones around her humming with something that wasn't quite sound. The air grew thick, pressing against her skin like invisible hands. Then came the howl. It started low, resonating from somewhere deep in the earth itself, and rose until it filled every corner of the basement, every cell of her body. It wasn't just a wolf's cry, it was older than that, primal in a way that made her human, mind want to fracture rather than comprehend. The Alpha King had made his choice. Footsteps thundered overhead, moving toward the main hall. More howls joined the first, a chorus of voices that were and weren't quite human. Sarah pulled against her chains, knowing it was useless but unable to stop herself. Her grandmother's warnings echoed through her memory. "They'll know you by your blood, by what your bloodline took from theirs, and they will make you pay for sins you never committed." The basement door crashed open. Torchlight spilled down the stone steps, and with it came the scent of pine and smoke and something wild that made Sarah's stomach clench. 2 guards descended, their eyes reflecting gold in the flickering light. Neither looked at her as they approached, their movements mechanical, rehearsed. "Alpha King demands the heretic," one said, his voice flat. "The Luna ceremony requires a blood offering." "No," Sarah kicked out as they reached for her chains, catching one in the day. "Knee." He barely flinched. His companion moved faster than she could track, pressing a hand to her throat and pinning her against the wall with inhuman strength. His fingers were fever-hot against her skin. "Don't make this harder," he growled. "You're already dead. How you go, that's the only choice you have left." The chains fell away. Before Sarah could even think about running, they hauled her to her feet and dragged her toward the stairs. Her legs didn't want to work, numb from hours of kneeling on cold stone. She stumbled, and neither guard slowed, simply lifted her between them like she weighed nothing. The main floor of the estate was a chaos of bodies and firelight. Pack members lined the halls, their faces flushed with drink and excitement, their eyes tracking Sarah's progress with something between pity and hunger. She tried to find a sympathetic face, someone who might question what was happening, but saw only the glazed devotion of true believers. They believed in the old ways, in blood debts and ancient justice, in making an example. The guards hauled her through a set of massive oak doors into the great hall, and Sarah's breath died in her throat. The room was circular, ringed with carved pillars that stretched 3 stories to a domed ceiling painted with constellations she didn't recognize. In the center, a raised dais held an altar of black stone, its surface stained dark with generations of offerings. And beyond it, seated on a throne of twisted wood and bone, was the Alpha King. He was looking away, his profile sharp as a blade in the firelight. Dark hair fell to his shoulders, and even from across the room, Sarah could see the tension coiled in his frame, the way he gripped the armrests of his throne like he wanted to splinter them. Power radiated from him in waves that made her skin prickle, made something deep in her chest respond in a way she didn't understand. The guards forced her to her knees before the altar. "The heretic, Alpha King," one announced, "for the Luna blessing." The pack had gone utterly silent, hundreds of eyes pressed against Sarah from every direction, but she couldn't look away from the figure on the throne, couldn't stop her traitorous body from trembling, not entirely from fear. Slowly, the Alpha King turned his head. Their eyes met, and the world caught fire. Sarah gasped as something invisible slammed into her chest, driving the air from her lungs. The Alpha King surged to his feet, his pupils blown wide, his entire body going rigid. The scent that had been clinging to the edges of her awareness suddenly overwhelmed everything else: mountain, snow, and dark forests, and something indefinably him, wrapping around her like chains far stronger than iron. "No," he said, his voice barely a whisper but carrying through the hall like thunder. "No, this isn't." He crossed the distance between them in 3 impossible strides, moving too fast to be human, and grabbed Sarah's face between his hands. His touch burned. His eyes pale gray, like winter dawn, searched hers with something close to horror. "What are you?" he demanded. Sarah couldn't answer, could barely think past the feeling of his hands on her skin, the way every nerve in her body was screaming at her to lean into him, to submit, to know. "No, this is wrong. I'm no one," she managed. "Please, I don't know what you want, but I didn't—" "Your scent." His grip tightened, not quite painful but inescapable. "You smell like—" He stopped, released her so abruptly she nearly fell. Took 3 steps back, his chest heaving, his hands curling into fists at his sides. The pack was stirring now, confused murmurs rising like a tide. Someone called out a question. Another voice joined it. The guards who'd brought Sierra looked between her and their alpha, uncertainty finally cracking their stone expressions. The Alpha King raised one hand, and silence fell like a guillotine. "Chain her," he said, his voice devoid of the emotion that had flickered across his face moments before. "In the North Tower, under guard, no one touches her, no one speaks to her. But Alpha King," an elder protested, stepping forward from the crowd. "The prophecy demands, I know what it demands." The Alpha King's roar shook the pillars. Several pack members dropped to their knees, baring their throats in automatic submission. "And I will decide how to proceed. Take her. Now." The guards grabbed Sarah again, but before they could drag her away, the Alpha King's gaze found hers one last time. In his eyes, she saw war between duty and something else, something that had ignited the moment their scents had mingled. "You should have run farther," he said softly, too softly for anyone but her to hear. "Because now, heretic or not, prophecy or not, you're mine, and I'm going to have to figure out whether that means I protect you." His jaw clenched. "Or kill you myself." The North Tower had no windows. Sarah discovered this in the proste, first 30 seconds of her imprisonment, when the guards shoved her through the iron door and she heard it clang shut behind her, swallowing even the torchlight from the corridor. Darkness pressed in from all sides, absolute and suffocating, broken only by a thin line of orange glow seeping under the door. She stood frozen, afraid to move, afraid to breathe too loudly. Her wrists still ached where the basement chains had bitten, and now phantom iron seemed to wrap around her lungs, squeezing. "You're mine." The Alpha King's words circled through her mind like wolves around a campfire. She'd heard possession in his voice. Yes, but also confusion. Fear, even, as if discovering her had broken something fundamental in his world. Their eyes had met, and the air itself had changed. Sarah pressed her palms against the cold stone wall, grounding herself. She needed to think, needed to understand what had happened in that hall, why a man who'd been prepared to sacrifice her had instead locked her away like something precious, or dangerous, maybe both. Her eyes adjusted slowly to the darkness. Not completely there, simply wasn't enough light, but gradually she made out the shape of the room. Small, circular, with walls that curved up into shadow, stone floor, no furniture except what felt like a pallet of blankets in one corner. And that smell again, faint but unmistakable, clinging to everything. Him. Sierra's stomach twisted. This was his space, had been. At some point, she could feel it in the way the air held his scent. In the residual warmth the stones seemed to remember. She sank onto the pallet, pulling her knees to her chest. Outside the tower, she could hear the pack continuing their celebration, though it sounded muted now, uncertain. The Luna ceremony had been interrupted. Their Alpha King had claimed no mate, had instead hidden away the heretic meant to die. They would have questions. She had more. Time crawled. Sierra drifted in and out of an exhausted, half-sleep, jerking awake at every distant sound, her heart hammering each time she thought she heard footsteps on the tower stairs. But no one came. The celebration eventually faded. Silence settled over the estate like snow. She must have finally fallen into real sleep, because when the door opened, she startled awake with a gasp. Gray dawn light spilled into the tower, and with it, a figure. The Alpha King stood in the doorway, a tray in his hands. He looked different in daylight, or what passed for it in the heavy, overcast morning. Older, maybe. More human, though that word felt wrong the moment she thought it. His gray eyes found hers, and that same electric current snapped through the air between them. He said nothing, just entered, set the tray on the floor near her pallet, and turned to leave. Wait. Sarah's voice came out rough, unused. Please. He stopped, his back to her, one hand on the doorframe. The muscles in his shoulders were rigid beneath his dark shirt. Why am I alive? She asked. Eat, he said. You need your strength. For what? Another ceremony? Another for surviving. He still didn't turn around. That's all you need to focus on right now. I don't understand. Sarah pushed herself to her feet, legs unsteady. Your people wanted me dead. You were going to let them, and then you looked at me and everything changed. Why? What did you see? His hand tightened on the wood. She watched the tendons flex, watched him fight something internal and violent. What are you running from? He asked instead of answering. The question caught her off guard. What? You crossed into pack territory alone, on foot, with nothing but the clothes on your back. You were running. From what? Sarah's jaw tightened. Does it matter? You've already decided I'm guilty of something. I've decided nothing. Finally, he turned to face her, and the intensity in his gaze nearly made her step back. Your bloodline took something from my pack, generations ago, but some debts don't fade. The elders wanted justice. Blood for blood. That's the law. I didn't take anything. I wasn't even born when... I know. His voice dropped lower. Which is why you're here instead of ash on that altar. They stared at each other. The tower felt too small suddenly. The air too thin. Sarah could feel her pulse in her throat, could feel that inexplicable pull toward him that made no sense. That should terrify her more than it did. You smelled me, she whispered. That's what changed. When you got close, you... Don't. The word cracked like a whip. Don't say it. Say what? I don't even know what happened. Good. He moved toward the door. Keep it that way. Is it a shifter thing? Sarah pressed, taking a step toward him. Some kind of, I don't know, recognition? Like wolves identifying pack? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. You're not pack. You're not even supposed to be possible. Then explain it to me. Frustration bled into her voice. You looked at me like I was a ghost. Like I was something you'd been waiting for and dreading at the same time. What am I to you? The Alpha King crossed the distance between them so fast she didn't have time to react. One moment he was by the door, the next his hand was cupped around the back of her neck, his face inches from hers, his breath warm against her skin. You're a mistake, he said softly, savagely. You're a complication I don't need. And you're making it very hard for me to remember why I shouldn't just... He stopped, released her, stepped back like she'd burned him. Sarah's whole body was trembling. Shouldn't what? Eat, he repeated, his voice empty again. I'll send someone to bring you water later. Wait, please. She reached for his arm without thinking. The moment her fingers brushed his skin, he flinched like she'd struck him. The look he gave her was pure anguish, quickly masked, but she'd seen it. Whatever this connection was between them, it was hurting. Don't touch me, he said. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Harder for who? He didn't answer, just left, closing the door behind him with careful control, like he didn't trust himself to do it gently. The lock clicked into place. Sarah stood in the center of the tower, her hand still extended, her mind reeling. She could still feel the warmth of his skin, could still smell that pine and snow scent wrapping around her like a living thing. You're mine, he'd said. But he was keeping her locked away, refusing to explain, fighting against whatever force had sparked between them in that hall. She looked down at the tray he'd brought. Bread, cheese, dried meat, real food, carefully arranged. He'd brought it himself instead of sending a guard. Sarah sank back onto the pallet, picked up a piece of bread, and tried to make sense of the impossible. An Alpha King who should want her dead, but couldn't let her die. A connection that felt written in her bones, but that he called a mistake. And the growing certainty that whatever her grandmother had been trying to protect her from, she'd walked straight into its jaws. The question was whether those jaws would close or whether the monster behind them was fighting just as hard as she was to understand what fate had thrown them into. Outside, she heard a wolf howl in the distance. Inside, something answered in her blood. 3 days passed in the tower. Sarah counted them by the Alpha King's visits, brief, silent encounters where he brought food and left before she could form questions. Each time, that same tension coiled between them, thick enough to choke on. Each time, He looked at her like she was a puzzle he needed to solve before it destroyed him. On the fourth morning, he didn't come alone. The door opened to reveal a woman in her mid-50s, silver threading through dark hair pulled into a severe bun. Her eyes were sharp and assessing as they swept over Sarah, taking in the rumpled dress, the exhaustion, the defiance still burning despite everything. "I'm Margot," she said, her voice crisp. "The Alpha King's advisor. He's asked me to see to your comfort." Behind her, the Alpha King stood in shadow, his expression unreadable. "How generous," Sierra said, hating how rough her voice sounded. "A comfortable prison is still a prison." Margot's lips twitched, almost a smile. "Better than an altar, girl. Don't forget that." She entered carrying a bundle of clothes and set them on the pallet. "Clean yourself up. You smell like fear and stone." "Margot." The Alpha King's voice was low, warning. "What?" "She does." Margot turned to him, unafraid in a way that suggested decades of familiarity. "You can't keep her locked in here forever, Callum. The pack is asking questions." Callum. His name settled into Sarah's mind, somehow fitting, sharp and strong and carrying weight. "Let them ask," he said. "They're asking why their Alpha King stopped a sacred ceremony for heretic blood." Margot crossed her arms. "They're asking what you plan to do with her. That's not their concern. It absolutely is their concern when Pack Law." "I am Pack Law." The words exploded from him, echoing off stone. Then, quieter, controlled again. "I'll address them when I'm ready." Margot studied him for a long moment, something knowing passing across her features. "You felt it, didn't you? When you caught her scent." Callum's jaw clenched. "We're not discussing this." "You felt it," Margot pressed. "And now you don't know what to do because every instinct you have is screaming one thing while your duty demands another." "Margot, what did he feel?" Sarah interrupted, looking between them. "Will someone please just tell me what's happening? What I am to you people?" Silence fell, heavy and dangerous. Margot glanced at Callum, clearly waiting for permission. When he gave the slightest nod, she turned back to Sarah. "You know what we are," she said. "Shifters. Wolves. Our kind has lived by ancient laws, for longer than your history books remember. One of those laws is the mate bond." Sarah's heart stuttered. "Mate bond?" "A connection between souls," Margot continued. "Recognized by scent, confirmed by instinct. When true mates find each other, the bond is," she paused, searching for words, "undeniable, absolute. It doesn't ask permission. It simply is." The tower seemed to tilt. Sarah grabbed the wall for balance, her mind racing. "No, that's not I'm human. That doesn't make sense." "It makes perfect sense," Margot said gently. "If you weren't entirely human." The words hung in the air like smoke. "What?" Sarah whispered. "Your grandmother." Callum spoke now, stepping into the light. His eyes found hers, and she saw something raw in them. "What do you know about her bloodline?" "Nothing. She never..." Sarah's throat closed. She remembered whispered conversations ending when she entered rooms. Her grandmother's strange warnings. The way other children's parents had looked at her, growing up, like they could see something wrong beneath her skin. "She told me to run. Before they found me. That's all." "She was protecting you," Margot said, "from a truth that would have gotten you killed years ago." "Stop dancing around it." Callum moved closer, that magnetic pull intensifying with each step. "Your grandmother was pack-born. A wolf who fell in love with a human and abandoned her pack to be with him. It's the worst betrayal in our law, choosing an outsider over blood, over duty." Sarah shook her head, but pieces were clicking into place with sickening clarity. Her grandmother's strength, even in old age. The way she'd seemed to sense things before they happened. Those nights she'd disappeared into the woods and returned smelling like pine and wild places. "The penalty for abandoning your pack," Margot continued, "is death. For the traitor and their bloodline." "That's barbaric," Sarah breathed. "That's survival." Callum's voice was hard. "Pack loyalty is not. Everything. Without it, we fracture. We die. Your grandmother knew the law when she broke it. So you were going to kill me for her choice? For something that happened before I was born?" "Yes. No hesitation, no apology. That was the plan. Until you smelled me." The words came out bitter. "Until you realized I was what? Your mate? Some cosmic joke where fate ties you to the very person you're supposed to execute?" Callum's expression didn't change, but she saw his hands curl into fists. "It's not a joke," Margot said quietly. "It's a test." "Of what?" "Of whether our laws are stronger than destiny. of whether an alpha can choose duty over the most powerful bond our kind knows. She looked at Callum, something like pity in her eyes. No alpha has ever had to make this choice. Mates are sacred, but so is pack law. Sarah felt the walls closing in. So that's it? You're just going to keep me here while you decide whether to kill me or what? I don't know, Callum said, and the admission seemed to cost him. The bond is complicated. It's affecting my judgment, making it hard to think clearly. Maybe that's the point. Sarah took a step toward him, watched him tense. Maybe you're not supposed to think clearly about murdering an innocent person for someone else's crime. You're not innocent. His voice dropped. Your blood carries the betrayal. Your existence is proof of it. My existence is proof that people can love across boundaries your laws say shouldn't be crossed. And look where it got them. The words tore out of him. Your grandmother died in hiding. Your mother. He stopped. Horror flickered across his face. My mother what? Sarah's voice shook. What happened to my mother? Margot shot Callum a warning look. But he wasn't looking at her. He was staring at Sarah like he'd just revealed too much. She died when I was born, Sarah said slowly. That's what Gran always told me. Complications from childbirth. But that was a lie, wasn't it? The silence was answer enough. Tell me. Sarah moved closer, close enough that his scent wrapped around her, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his skin. What happened to my mother? Callum's jaw worked. She came back. Tried to return to the pack after your grandmother died. She thought enough time had passed, that the law might have softened. And it hadn't. His eyes met hers, holding devastating truth. The elders made an example of her, a warning to anyone else who might think about abandoning pack for outsiders. The tower spun. Sarah couldn't breathe. How? She whispered. Sarah, how did they kill my mother? Callum looked at her like it was killing him to say it. The same way they wanted to kill you. Blood offering during the Luna ceremony. 23 years ago. The same ceremony, the same altar, history repeating itself in her blood. You knew, Sarah said, numb. When they brought me in, you knew who I was. I suspected. Your grandmother's disappearance was legendary. A cautionary tale. He paused. I was 7 when they killed your mother. I remember it. Something in Sarah shattered. She lunged at him, fists connecting with his chest even though it was like hitting stone. You remembered and you were going to let them do it again. He caught her wrists gently, inexorably. Until I caught your scent. Until the bond. He stopped, released her, stepped back. Get cleaned up. I'll send food. I don't want your food. You need to eat. He was retreating toward the door, and she could see the struggle in every line of his body, between approaching and fleeing. This isn't over. It never started, Sarah shot back. Whatever you think this bond is, I don't feel it. I feel trapped. By you, by your laws, by a history I never asked for. Lie. The word felt like a lie, even as she said it, but she needed it to be true. Callum stopped in the doorway, turned back. The look he gave her was full of anguish and heat and something that made her breath catch, despite everything. You're a terrible liar, he said softly. I can smell it on you. The bond. You feel it just as much as I do. Then he was gone, the door locked, and Sarah was alone with the truth. She could feel it, the pull, the rightness of his presence, the wrongness of his absence. Her body knew him even as her mind screamed to resist. Fate had tied her to her mother's murderer, and she didn't know if she wanted to kill him or kiss him. Sarah didn't touch the clothes Margot had left. For 2 days, she wore her defiance like armor, refusing to accept anything from Callum beyond the bare minimum to survive. She ate the food he brought. She wasn't stupid enough to starve herself, but she wouldn't speak to him, wouldn't look at him, treated his presence like she would a ghost. It was easier than admitting how much she noticed everything about him. The way his shoulders dropped slightly when he entered, like the weight he carried everywhere else became heavier in her presence. How his hands were always careful when he set down the tray, never making sudden movements. The shadows under his eyes that deepened each day, suggesting he slept as poorly as she did. On the 3rd morning, he broke the pattern. You need to bathe, he said, not leaving immediately like usual. Sarah, sitting against the far wall, didn't respond. Sarah. Her name and his voice did something to her spine, made it straighten against her will. I'm not trying to humiliate you. There's a washroom connected to this tower. I can have Margot. I don't need anything from you. You're being stubborn. I'm being a prisoner. She finally looked at him, let him see the anger burning there. There's a difference. Callum's jaw tightened. He set down the tray and didn't move toward the door. Instead, he leaned against the wall, arms crossed, studying her like she was a problem he was trying to solve without all the pieces. "You think I want this?" he asked quietly. "I think you're a coward." His eyes flashed gold for just a second, wolf rising to the surface. "Careful. Why? You've already decided I'm going to die eventually. What's the point of being careful?" Sierra pushed herself to her feet, ignoring how her legs protested the movement. "You felt this bond, or whatever it is, and instead of questioning your barbaric laws, you locked me away so you wouldn't have to deal with the contradiction." "I locked you away to keep you alive," he shot back. "The elders want your blood. Half the pack thinks I've gone soft, that I'm betraying our ancestors by not finishing what they started. Every day you breathe is me fighting against centuries of law and tradition. How noble. Should I thank you for not murdering me yet?" Callum moved so fast she didn't see it coming. One moment he was across the room. The next he was inches away, his hand pressed to the wall beside her head, caging her in. His scent overwhelmed everything, pine and snow, and something wild that made her pulse race. "You don't understand what you're asking me to choose," he said, voice low and rough. "My pack, my duty, everything I've built. Or you, a stranger who by all rights should be my enemy. Then choose." Sierra lifted her chin, refusing to show fear even though her heart was hammering. "Stop dragging this out. Either kill me or let me go." "I can't do either." "Why not?" "Because—" He stopped, something breaking in his expression. His free hand came up, hovering near her face but not quite touching. "Because when I'm near you, everything I thought I knew becomes uncertain. My wolf recognizes you as mate, as sacred, as the one thing in this world we're supposed to protect above all else. But my mind knows what you represent. The betrayal, the breaking of laws that keep us whole." Sarah's breath caught. This close, she could see flecks of silver in his gray eyes, could feel the heat radiating from his skin, and that pull, that inexplicable magnetism, was stronger than ever, urging her to lean in, to close the distance. She shoved at his chest. "Get away from me." He didn't move. "You feel it too. Stop pretending you don't. Feeling something doesn't make it right." Her voice shook. "You might not have killed my mother yourself, but you serve the same laws that did. You uphold the same traditions. So whatever this is between us, it's built on blood and violence, and I want no part of it." Something flickered in his eyes. Pain, maybe, or recognition. "Then why is your pulse racing?" he asked softly. "Why do you lean toward me even as you push me away?" "I don't—" "Your body knows what your mind won't accept." His hand finally touched her face, just fingertips against her cheek, and Sierra gasped at the shock of contact. The bond doesn't care about logic or history. It just is. For a moment, they stood frozen in that electric space between violence and surrender. Sarah could feel her resolve cracking, could feel something deeper than anger rising, up a longing she didn't want to name. A recognition that terrified her. Then footsteps echoed on the tower stairs. Callum jerked back like he'd been burned, putting distance between them just as the door swung open. Margot entered, took one look at them both, and raised an eyebrow. "The elders are demanding an audience," she said to Callum. "Today, they won't be put off any longer." His expression shuddered, became the cold mask Sierra had seen in the Great Hall. "Tell them I'll address the pack tonight. They want a decision about the girl. They'll get one." Margot's gaze shifted to Sarah, sympathy in her eyes. "Callum, tonight," he repeated, and there was finality in the word. He left without another glance at Sarah, but she felt his absence like a physical ache. The tower seemed colder, emptier, wrong. Margot lingered. "He's trying to find a way," she said quietly, "to keep you alive and keep his pack intact. It's not easy." "Nothing about this is easy," Sierra replied, wrapping her arms around herself. "But he's the Alpha King. Surely he can change the laws. Laws written in blood aren't easily rewritten. Especially not for—" She paused. "For someone like me," Sarah finished bitterly. "Tainted bloodline. Living proof of betrayal. I was going to say for someone who threatens everything they believe about loyalty and duty." Margot moved closer, her voice dropping. "But between you and me, those old laws have always been too rigid, too cruel. Maybe it takes something like this, someone like you, to break them. Or maybe it just gets me killed. Maybe." Margot didn't sugarcoat it. "But I've known Callum since he was a boy. I've never seen him fight himself this hard over anything. That has to mean something." She left, and Sierra was alone again with her thoughts and the lingering scent of pine and snow. "Tonight," He would address the pack tonight, which meant tonight he would decide whether the mate bond was worth fighting for, or whether duty would win. Sarah looked at the clean clothes still folded on the pallet. After a long moment, she picked them up. Simple pants and a soft shirt, both in dark colors that would let her disappear into shadows if she needed to. If she was going to face her fate, she wouldn't do it cowering. She found the washroom Callum had mentioned, a small space with a basin and clean water. As she washed away days of grime, she tried not to think about how his hand had felt against her face, how her entire body had responded to his proximity, how even now, knowing what his pack had done to her mother, some traitorous part of her wanted to trust him. The mate bond, Margot had called it, a connection that didn't ask permission. Sarah stared at her reflection in the small mirror above the basin. Her grandmother's eyes looked back at her dark and determined. Her mother's defiance lived in the set of her jaw. They had both chosen love over law. Both paid the price. But Sarah wasn't going to just accept her fate. Tonight, when Callum addressed his pack, when he stood at that crossroads between duty and desire, she would make sure he understood exactly what he was choosing. Even if it broke them both, they came for her at dusk. Not guards this time, but Margot, her expression grave. "It's time," she said simply, and Sarah's stomach dropped. The great hall was different at night. Torches cast dancing shadows across the carved pillars, and the domed ceiling seemed to swallow the light, making the space feel simultaneously vast and suffocating. The pack had gathered hundreds of them, filling every corner, their eyes reflecting gold and amber in the firelight. All of them watching as Margot led Sarah to the center of the room. Not to the altar this time, just to an open space before the dais where Callum sat on his throne, surrounded by 7 elders in ceremonial robes. He looked every inch the Alpha King now power radiating from him, spine straight, face carved from stone. But when his eyes found hers, something flickered beneath the ice. Recognition, regret, something that might have been apology. Sarah lifted her chin and met his gaze steadily. Whatever happened next, she wouldn't cower. One of the elders stepped forward, an ancient man with silver hair and eyes like flint. "Alpha King Callum," he intoned, his voice carrying through the hall. "3 cycles of the moon have passed since you halted the sacred ceremony. 3 nights the pack has waited for justice. We demand resolution." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Callum rose slowly, and silence fell like a hammer. He moved to the edge of the dais, his presence commanding absolute attention. "Elder Marcus speaks truth," he said, his voice resonating with authority. "I stopped the ceremony. I denied you the blood offering our law demands." He paused, letting the words settle. "I did this because the moment I caught her scent, everything changed." The hall erupted in whispers. Sarah felt the weight of hundreds of stares, felt the confusion and anger emanating from the pack like heat. "Changed how?" Marcus demanded. "The law is clear, Alpha King. Heretic blood must be answered with, 'She's my mate.'" The words fell like stones into still water, ripples of shock spreading outward. Someone gasped. Others began speaking over each other, voices rising in disbelief and outrage. Sarah's knees nearly buckled. He'd said it, publicly, undeniably. Marcus's face darkened. "Impossible. The moon goddess would not bind our Alpha to corrupted bloodline. And yet she has." Callum's voice cut through the chaos. "I am wolf enough to recognize what my instincts tell me. The bond is real, undeniable, sacred." "Sacred?" Another elder, a woman with iron-gray braids, stepped forward. "There is nothing sacred about the betrayer's line. Her grandmother abandoned her pack, chose a human over blood duty. Her mother tried to return and paid the price our law demands. This girl," she pointed at Sarah with disgust, "is living proof of that continued betrayal. This girl," Callum said, his tone dropping to something dangerous, "is mine. Touch her, and you answer to me." The threat was unmistakable. Several pack members shifted uneasily. "You would put one tainted female above your entire pack?" Marcus's voice shook with barely contained rage. "Above centuries of law? Above your duty as Alpha?" "I would have both." Callum descended from the dais, moving towards Sarah. The crowd parted automatically, instinct making them clear a path for their Alpha. "I will not sacrifice my mate to uphold a law that punishes the innocent for the crimes of their ancestors." He stopped in front of Sarah, and up close she could see the storm in his eyes, determination warring with uncertainty. "But neither," he continued, turning back to address the pack, "will I dismiss the pain her bloodline has caused. The betrayal was real. The wound to our pack was deep. Then what do you propose?" The female elder demanded. "You cannot simply ignore," A new law. Callum's voice rang out clear and absolute. The old way demanded blood for blood, death for betrayal. But what if there was another path? One that honors our past while allowing for redemption. Sarah's heart was pounding so hard she thought everyone must hear it. Speak plainly, Marcus growled. A trial by pack, Callum said. Sierra will live among us, work alongside us, prove that she is more than her bloodline, that she can contribute to the pack rather than threaten it. He paused. And if, at the next Luna ceremony, the pack agrees she has earned her place, then the debt is paid. Not in blood, but in service. In loyalty earned rather than inherited. The hall exploded in arguments. Some voices raised in support, others in vehement opposition. Sarah stood frozen, trying to process what he was offering. Not freedom, but a chance. A slim, terrifying chance. And if she fails? Marcus asked, cutting through the noise. If she proves as treacherous as her grandmother? Callum's jaw tightened. Then I will carry out the sentence myself. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. He met her eyes, and she saw the cost of that promise written in his expression. You would kill your own mate? The female elder asked, clearly skeptical. I am alpha before I am mate, Callum replied, though something in his voice suggested the words tasted like ash. My duty to the pack comes first, always. Lie, Sarah thought. She could see it in the tension of his shoulders, the way his hands curled into fists. He was trying to convince himself as much as them. Marcus studied Callum for a long moment, then turned to the other elders. They conferred in low voices while the pack waited, the tension thick enough to choke on. Finally, Marcus faced Callum again. Your proposal is unconventional, but you are Alpha King. We will accept this trial on 3 conditions. Name them. First, she lives under constant supervision. No, privacy. No opportunity to betray pack secrets or escape. Callum nodded. Agreed. Second, she wears the mark of the accused. Everyone must know what she is, what she's trying to prove. What mark? Sarah found her voice, though it came out weaker than she wanted. The female elder smiled coldly. A silver collar. Inscribed with your crime. You will wear it until the trial ends one way or another. Silver. The metal that burned shifters, that weakened them. On a human with wolf blood, it would be a constant reminder, a punishment in itself. Callum's expression hardened, but he nodded again. And the third condition? Marcus stepped closer, his ancient eyes boring into Callum. She is forbidden from sharing your bed. Forbidden from physical intimacy that might cloud your judgment. The mate bond makes you vulnerable, Alpha King. We will not watch you be manipulated by base instinct. Sarah saw Callum flinch, just slightly. Saw the cost of that particular condition register in his eyes. If we discover any inappropriate contact, the female elder added, the trial ends immediately. And so does she. The hall had gone silent. Everyone watching their Alpha, waiting to see if he would accept terms that essentially denied the very bond he'd just declared sacred. Callum looked at Sarah. In his eyes, she saw apology and promise, and a question. Can you survive this? She gave the smallest nod. Because what choice did she have? Agreed, Callum said, his voice hollow. All 3 conditions. Marcus smiled, victorious. Then let the trial begin. Bring the collar. As a guard came forward carrying a thin silver band inscribed with words Sarah couldn't read from this distance, she realized what Callum had really done. He'd bought her time, bought her a chance. But the price was distance-enforced separation from the one person whose presence made the bond feel less like a curse. The collar snapped around her neck, and Sarah gasped as silver bit into her skin, burning like frozen fire. Callum's hands clenched at his sides, his wolf clearly fighting for dominance, demanding he protect his mate from pain. But he stood still, honored his word, chose duty, and Sarah understood, with crystalline clarity, that the real trial wasn't whether she could earn the pack's acceptance. It was whether either of them could survive being bound by fate while being forced to stay apart. The collar burned for 3 days straight. Sarah learned to move carefully, to avoid touching it, to breathe through the constant ache that radiated from her throat. The inscription was in the old language blood betrayer, and every pack member who saw it knew exactly what she was trying to escape. Most looked at her with contempt, some with pity, none with trust. Margot had been assigned as her primary supervisor, which Sarah suspected was Callum's doing a small mercy in a situation designed to break her. The older woman woke her before dawn each day and set her to work in the communal, kitchens, preparing meals for a pack that wouldn't speak to her. Callum kept his distance. Sierra saw him only in passing a glimpse across the courtyard, his figure disappearing into the forest with hunting parties, his voice carrying from the great hall during pack meetings she wasn't allowed to attend. Each time, her treacherous heart would leap, the bond pulling at her like a fishing line hooked deep. And each time, he would look away. On the fourth morning, Margot handed her a basket. "You're gathering herbs today." "In the forest." Sarah looked up from the potatoes she'd been peeling. "Alone? With a guard?" Margot's expression was carefully neutral. "The healer needs wolfsbane and silverleaf. You'll find them near the eastern creek." The guard turned out to be a young man named Finn, barely 20, with nervous energy and eyes that kept darting to her collar. He stayed 10 paces behind as they walked into the woods, close enough to watch but far enough to make it clear she was untouchable. The forest was beautiful in a way that made Sierra's chest ache. Morning light filtered through pine branches, turning everything golden and green. The air smelled clean, wild, free. For the first time since the tower, she could almost breathe. "The creek's this way," Finn said, breaking the silence. His voice was younger than his attempt at gruffness suggested. Sarah followed the sound of running water, finding the plants Margot had described growing along the banks. As she knelt to harvest them, she felt Finn's stare burning into her back. "You can ask," she said without turning around. "Whatever you're wondering." A pause. "Is it true? That you're his mate?" "Apparently." Sarah placed Silverleaf carefully in her basket. "Though I don't think either of us is happy about it. The Alpha King hasn't taken a mate in 10 years. Not since..." Finn stopped abruptly. Sarah turned to look at him. "Since what?" "Nothing. Pack business." But curiosity was a living thing now, coiling, in her stomach. He was mated before? Finn's jaw worked, clearly debating whether answering would get him in trouble. Finally, "Promised, not mated. There's a difference. What happened?" "She died." The words came out flat. "Rogue attack, 5 years ago. He was supposed to choose a new mate at the Luna ceremony, but he kept postponing. The elders were getting impatient. Something cold settled in Sierra's chest. So when I showed up, you weren't just the heretic who needed to die. You were also the excuse he'd been looking for. To keep avoiding that choice." Finn shifted his weight. "At least, that's what some pack members think. And what do you think?" He met her eyes directly for the first time. "I think the way he looked at you in that hall wasn't an excuse for anything. I think it scared him." Before Sierra could respond, a howl split the air close. Urgent. Wrong. Finn's head snapped up, his body going rigid. "Rogues," he breathed. "Stay behind me. What's happening?" "Quiet." He shifted in a blur of motion, bones cracking. Fur sprouting. Human form replaced by a massive gray wolf in seconds. The transformation was beautiful and terrible, and confirmed everything Sarah had been trying not to think about. These weren't just people who could become wolves. They were something older. Something that lived between two worlds. More howls answered the first. Through the trees, Sarah caught glimpses of movement wolves that moved wrong, that smelled of decay and madness. Rogues, pack members who'd lost themselves to their animal nature. Finn growled, placing himself between Sarah and the approaching threat. But there were too many. She could see at least 5 circling through the underbrush, and Finn was alone. One rogue broke from the trees, eyes wild and foaming, heading straight for them. Sarah grabbed a fallen branch, knowing it was useless but refusing to die without fighting. The rogue leaped, and was hit midair by a larger wolf, black as midnight, with silver-gray eyes. "Callum." Sarah recognized him instantly, the bond singing recognition even in this form. He tore into the rogue with vicious efficiency, defending his territory, defending his mate. The word whispered through her mind like it had been placed there by someone else. 2 more rogues attacked. Finn jumped to intercept one while Callum faced the other, and Sarah realized with horror that she was the tactical weakness. They were fighting divided, trying to protect her while being outnumbered. "I need to run," she called out. "Lead them away from." Callum's wolf turned to her and growled a clear command. "Stay." But another rogue had circled behind them. It burst from the brush, jaws open, heading straight for Sarah's throat. She swung the branch with everything she had. It connected with the rogue's skull with a sickening crack, stunning it just long enough for Callum to break away and finish what she'd started. The remaining rogues fled, sensing the fight was lost. Silence fell, broken only by heavy breathing and the creek's indifferent babble. Callum shifted back to human form, and Sarah tried very hard not to notice that he was completely naked, tried not to see the way his chest heaved, or how his muscles moved under skin marked with fresh scratches. "You should have run," he said, his voice rough. "Your wolf told me to stay. My wolf is an idiot when it comes to you." He looked at Finn, who was also human again and hastily pulling on clothes from a pack he'd stashed nearby. "Get her back to the estate. Now." "Alpha King," Finn began. "Now." The command was absolute. But before Finn could move, Callum crossed to Syrah in 3 strides. His hand went to her throat, fingers carefully avoiding the silver collar as he tilted her head, checking for injuries. "You hit a rogue," he said softly, and there was something like wonder in his voice. "A human woman with a stick, and you hit a rogue wolf." "I wasn't going to just stand there." His thumb brushed the edge of the collar, and Syrah hissed as the movement made silver scrape against her burned skin. Callum's expression darkened. "It's hurting you. That's the point, isn't it?" Sarah. Her name was almost a plea. They were too close. She could feel his heat, could smell pine and snow and something uniquely him. The bond was screaming at her to lean in, to close the distance. "We can't," she whispered. "I know." But he didn't move away. His hand was still at her throat, his eyes searching hers. "The trial will end with me dead if we break the terms. Then I'll find another way." The words were fierce, determined. "I'll change the law. I'll make them see, Callum." She said his name for the first time, and watched something break in his expression. "You can't fix this with authority. You have to let me prove myself. And if you can't, if they decide you've failed, then you keep your promise." Syrah held his gaze steadily. "You do your duty. You put your pack first. That's not—" His jaw clenched. "You don't understand what you're asking." "I understand perfectly." She stepped back, forcing him to drop his hand. "I'm asking you to be the alpha your pack needs, even if it means destroying what fate gave you." Pain flickered across his face, raw and devastating. Then his mask slammed back into place. He turned to Finn. "Tell no one about the rogues near the eastern border. I'll handle it." To Syrah, "The collar comes off tonight. I don't care what the elders said, I won't watch you burn. That breaks the terms. I'm Alpha King. I'll find a way around it." He looked at her one more time, and in his eyes she saw everything he couldn't say. "You saved yourself today. Keep doing that, until I can figure out how to save us both." Then he shifted and disappeared into the trees, leaving Syrah with her racing heart and the growing certainty that neither of them would survive this trial intact. The collar didn't come off that night, or the next, or the one after that. Syrah understood why when she overheard 2 elders talking in the corridor outside the kitchens. Marcus had caught wind of Callum's intention and threatened to end the trial immediately if he interfered with the terms. The Alpha King could command many things, but the council held power too, especially when it came to matters of law and tradition. So the silver stayed, burning its constant reminder into her skin. Syrah threw herself into work. If she was going to survive this trial, she needed the pack to see her as useful, indispensable even. She worked longer hours than required, volunteered for the tasks no one else wanted, kept her head down and her mouth shut when pack members muttered insults just loud enough for her to hear. At night, alone in the small room they'd given her above the kitchens, she touched the raw skin beneath the collar and wondered how long she could endure. The bond didn't help. It pulled at her constantly, an invisible thread connecting her to Callum no matter where he was in the estate. She felt when he was close her pulse would quicken, her skin would flush. She felt when he was gone an emptiness that had no business existing for someone she'd known less than 2 weeks. On the 7th day, Margot found her scrubbing the great hall floors. "You're bleeding," the older woman said, kneeling beside her. Syrah looked down. Her hands were raw, blistered from the lye soap. She'd been so focused on working, on proving her worth, she hadn't noticed. "It's nothing," she said. "It's infection waiting to happen." Margot pulled her to her feet with surprising strength. "Come, the healer needs to see you. I have to finish. The floors have been here for 200 years. They'll survive another hour." Margot's tone left no room for argument. The healer's quarters were in the east wing, filled with dried herbs and the smell of medicine. An elderly woman with kind eyes examined Syrah's hands, tizging, softly as she applied salve. "You work too hard," she said. "The body needs rest to heal. I need the pack to see I'm useful. They see you're desperate." The healer wrapped Syrah's hands in clean bandages. "There's a difference. Desperation breeds contempt. Confidence earns respect. Hard to be confident when everyone wants you dead." The healer's eyes crinkled with something that might have been amusement. Not everyone. And the ones who matter most are watching closer than you think. Before Sierra could ask what she meant, the door opened. Callum stood in the doorway, and the air immediately changed, charged, electric, impossible to ignore. His eyes went straight to Sierra's bandaged hands, then to her face, then to the collar. She watched his jaw clench. "I need to speak with the healer," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Alone." "I was just leaving," Sierra said, standing. "Stay." The command was soft but absolute. He looked at the healer. "Please, Nora, give us a moment." The elderly woman studied him, then nodded and left, closing the door behind her. Margot had already disappeared, which meant Sierra and Callum were alone for the first time since the forest. The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unsaid. "Your hands," he finally said, "will heal. You're pushing yourself too hard. I'm doing what I have to do." Sarah kept her voice steady. "To survive your trial." He flinched. "It's not my trial. It's theirs. You agreed to the terms, to keep you alive." The words burst out of him, frustration and helplessness bleeding through his control. "Do you think I want to watch you destroy yourself trying to earn acceptance from people who've already decided you're guilty? Then what do you want?" Sarah demanded, her own frustration rising. "You can't protect me. You can't change the terms. You can't even take off this collar without risking everything. So what exactly are we doing here?" Callum crossed to her in 2 strides, stopping just, short of touching. Close enough that she could feel his heat, could see the war in his eyes. "I want," he said quietly, intensely, "to make this right. I want to find a way where you don't have to bleed to prove your humanity. Where my pack can see past their hatred long enough to recognize what I see, someone brave enough to stand in front of a rogue wolf with nothing but a branch. Someone who works until her hands blister rather than beg for mercy. Someone who—" He stopped, jaw working. "Someone who what?" Sarah whispered. "Someone who makes me question every certainty I've built my life on." His hand came up, hovering near her face but not quite touching, respecting the boundaries that could get them both killed. The bond was supposed to be the problem, but you, even without it, you would still be dangerous to me. Because of my bloodline, because of who you are. His voice dropped lower. Because you make me want to be the kind of alpha who changes broken laws instead of enforcing them. Because when you look at me like that, I forget every reason why we're supposed to be impossible." Sierra's breath caught. They were too close. She could see the flecks of silver in his gray eyes, could see the fresh scratch on his jaw from the rogue fight, could feel the bond singing between them like a living thing. "The elders are watching," she managed. "If they think we're, let them watch." But he stepped back, and the loss of his proximity felt like cold water. "I won't risk your life for a moment's comfort. But I need you to know," he paused. "The trial isn't the end. Win or lose, I'm not done fighting for this. For you, Callum, you can't promise. I'm Alpha King." Something fierce entered his expression. "I've been letting others dictate terms because I was trying to honor tradition, trying to balance duty with desire. But they were wrong. About the law, about blood debt, about you." He moved to the door, then looked back. "Stop destroying yourself, trying to earn their approval," he said. "You've already earned mine. Now I need to make them see what I see." He left before she could respond, and Sarah stood in the healer's quarters with her bandaged hands and her burning throat, trying to understand what had just shifted between them. He wasn't just protecting her anymore. He was preparing to fight for her. That night, lying in her small room, Sarah touched the collar and felt something besides pain. She felt possibility. Fragile and dangerous, but real. The bond hummed beneath her skin, and for the first time, she didn't push it away. She let herself feel the connection, let herself acknowledge what her body had known from the beginning. Callum was hers as much as she was his. And maybe, just maybe, that was stronger than any law written in blood. Outside her window, a wolf howled. She knew without seeing that it was him, keeping watch, staying close even when he couldn't be near. Sarah closed her eyes and let herself imagine a future where the collar came off, where the trial ended in something other than death, where an Alpha King and a heretic's granddaughter could choose each other without the world burning down around them. It was a dangerous dream, but she was already living in a dangerous reality. What was one more impossible thing to hope for? The attack came on the 13th day. Sarah was in the root cellar, cataloging winter stores, when she heard the screams. She dropped the ledger and ran toward the sound, emerging into chaos. Pack members were shifting mid-stride, children being herded toward the main house, warriors forming defensive lines. Rogues, dozens of them, pouring from the forest like a diseased flood. "Get inside!" Someone shouted at Sarah, but she couldn't move, couldn't look away from the violence unfolding in the courtyard. These rogues were different from the ones in the forest, more organized, more deliberate. They were hunting. A rogue broke through the line, heading straight, for a young girl frozen in terror. Sarah didn't think. She grabbed a cast-iron pan from the kitchen doorway and swung with everything she had, catching the rogue across the skull. It yelped and turned on her, lips pulled back from bloody teeth. "This is how I die," she thought with strange clarity. Then Callum was there, his wolf form massive and terrifying, putting himself between her and the threat. He tore into the rogue with savage efficiency, while two other warriors dragged Sarah back toward the house. The battle lasted minutes, but felt like hours. When the last rogue fled or fell, the courtyard was painted red. 3 pack members lay injured. One wouldn't survive. Sarah stood in the doorway, pan still clutched in her shaking hands, and watched Callum shift back to human. Blood streaked his chest, some his, most not. His eyes found hers across the carnage, and something passed between them that had nothing to do with words. He'd almost lost her. She'd almost lost him. The bond screamed with relief and terror in equal measure. Marcus appeared, his face thunderous. "This is the second attack in 2 weeks. Rogues don't organize like this. Someone is leading them." "I know," Callum said, his voice rough. "Gather the senior warriors. We need to address the real problem." Marcus pointed at Sarah. "She arrives, and suddenly rogues target our territory with precision they've never shown before. You don't find that suspicious?" Several pack members turned to look at Sarah, suspicion hardening their expressions. "That's insane," Margot interjected, pushing forward. "She was in the root cellar. She saved Maya's daughter. Or she's a spy," another elder said, the woman with iron-gray braids. "Sent to weaken us from within while rogues strike from without. Heretic blood has always been treacherous." "Enough," Callum's voice cracked like a whip. "Sarah had nothing to do with this." "How can you be certain?" Marcus challenged. "The mate bond clouds your judgment, Alpha King. You see what you want to see. I see clearly enough to know that she just risked her life defending our children while some of our warriors hesitated." Callum's gaze swept the gathered crowd. "I see someone who works harder than any of you, who endures pain and isolation without complaint, who stands her ground when attacked. If that's treachery, then perhaps we need to redefine loyalty." The courtyard went silent. Marcus's expression darkened. "You defend her above your pack, above those who bled for you today." "I defend truth," Callum shot back. "And the truth is that someone is organizing these attacks. But it's not her." The rogues moved with military precision. They avoided our strongest warriors and targeted the vulnerable. That takes inside knowledge. The implication hung in the air like poison. "You accuse one of us?" The female elder breathed. "I accuse no one yet, but I won't let you scapegoat an innocent woman because it's easier than facing the real threat." Marcus stepped closer, his voice dropping but carrying nonetheless. "Your father would be ashamed." He understood that duty meant sacrifice, that being alpha meant putting pack above personal desire. Sarah watched Callum's expression shudder, saw old pain flicker behind his eyes. "My father," he said quietly, dangerously, "also believed that strength came from fear, and that loyalty was bought with blood. His reign nearly destroyed this pack. I won't make his mistakes." "No," Marcus said. "You'll make new ones, starting with her." He turned and walked away, taking several elders with him. The remaining pack members dispersed slowly, many casting dark looks at Sarah before leaving. When only Margot, a few loyal warriors, and Sarah remained, Callum finally allowed himself to look tired. His shoulders dropped, and Sarah saw the weight he carried, the impossible balance between protecting her and leading his pack. "Maya's daughter," Sarah said into the silence. "Is she unhurt?" "Thanks to you." Margot's voice was gentle. "That's the second time you've defended pack members at risk to yourself. Anyone would have, anyone didn't," Callum interrupted, moving toward her. He stopped himself before getting too close, but his eyes held hers. "You did." A warrior approached, deferential but urgent. "Alpha King, the wounded need your attention. And we should scout the forest, make sure the rogues aren't regrouping." Callum nodded but didn't move, still looking at Sarah. "Get her cleaned up," he told Margot, "and post guards. If Marcus tries anything, I'll handle Marcus," Margot said firmly. "You handle your pack." He left, but not before one last glance that made Sarah's throat tight. Margot guided her back inside, to a washroom where she could clean the blood from her hands, blood that wasn't hers, that belonged to a threat she'd faced without hesitation. "You're braver than you know," Margot said, helping her wash. "Or more foolish. I haven't decided which." "I didn't think," Sarah admitted. "I just saw that little girl and proved you're more pack than most wolves I know." Margot met her eyes in the mirror. "But it won't matter to Marcus. He's decided you're guilty, and he'll find evidence to support that belief whether it exists or not. What do I do?" "Survive until the Luna ceremony. Let Callum fight the battles he can fight. And..." She paused. "Be careful. The rogues aren't the only threat here." That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. The collar burned worse than ever, infected from stress and the day's violence. She pressed a cool cloth to her throat and tried not to think about how close death had come. A soft knock made her jump. She opened the door to find Callum standing in the hallway, and her heart nearly stopped. They couldn't be seen together. "The risk, I know," he said, reading her expression. "But I had to..." He stopped, jaw working. "I needed to see that you were real, that you survived." "I'm fine," she whispered. "You're not." His eyes went to the collar, to the angry red skin visible above it. "Let me see. Callum, please." She tilted her head, exposing the damage. His sharp inhale told her how bad it looked. "This ends," he said quietly. "Tomorrow I'm calling a council. I'm challenging the terms. They'll stop the trial. Then I'll face whatever comes next. But I won't watch you die slowly to satisfy their cruelty." Sarah reached up, not quite touching him but close enough to feel his heat. "What happened to duty? To being alpha first?" "I'm learning," he said, voice rough with emotion. "That being a good alpha means knowing when the old ways need to die. My father couldn't see that, but maybe I can." They stood in the doorway, separated by inches and impossible circumstances, connected by something that refused to break despite everything trying to sever it. "Go," Sarah finally said. "Before someone sees." He nodded but didn't move. "Tomorrow changes everything. Be ready." Then he was gone, leaving her with a racing heart and the terrifying knowledge that tomorrow, Callum was going to bet everything, his authority, his pack, his future on her, and she had no idea if either of them would survive what came next. Morning came with the weight of a blade hanging overhead. Sarah felt it the moment she woke, the tension thrumming through the estate like a plucked string. Pack members moved with purpose, their voices hushed, their glances sharp. Word had spread. The Alpha King was calling an emergency council. Margot appeared at dawn with fresh clothes and a grim expression. "He's really doing it," she said quietly, challenging the elders directly. "Can he win?" Sarah asked, fingers unconsciously going to the collar. "He's Alpha King. He has authority. But Marcus has something more dangerous: tradition and fear." Margot helped her dress in clean pants and a simple tunic. "The pack is fracturing. Some support Callum. Others think he's been compromised by the mate bond. Today we'll decide which side has more power." The great hall filled quickly. Sarah was positioned near the back, flanked by 2 guards who'd been surprisingly kind over the past weeks. The entire pack seemed to be present, arranged in a circle around the central space where Callum stood facing the 7 elders. He looked every inch a king, spine straight, power radiating from him, his gray eyes cold and assessing. But Sarah could see the tension in his shoulders, could feel through the bond how much this moment cost him. Marcus stepped forward. "You've called this council, Alpha King. Speak your challenge." "The trial ends today," Callum said, his voice carrying to every corner. "I'm removing the collar and declaring the blood debt paid." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The female elder's face flushed with anger. "You have no authority," she began. "I have every authority." Callum cut her off. "I am Alpha. My word is law." "Your word is corrupted." Marcus's voice boomed. "The mate bond has destroyed your judgment. We agreed to terms designed to torture an innocent woman." Callum's eyes swept the gathered pack. "Sarah has spent 2 weeks proving herself. She's worked harder than any of you. She's defended our children twice now. She bleeds silver every day to satisfy your cruelty. What more do you need?" "We need her gone," someone shouted from the crowd. Others murmured agreement. "Why?" Callum demanded. "Because she carries blood from someone who chose love over duty? Because her grandmother dared to be happy outside pack law? That makes her guilty of what?" "Exactly. Betrayal is in her blood," Marcus countered. "Her very existence is an insult to everything we stand for." What we stand for is survival. Unity. Strength. Callum's voice rose. But I look around and see a pack so obsessed with punishing the past that you're destroying our future. Rogues attack with increasing frequency. Our territory is threatened. And you're focused on a woman whose only crime is being born? The female elder stepped forward, her voice sharp. She could be the reason for those attacks. Heretic blood draws corruption. Heretic blood saved Maya's daughter. Callum shot back. Where were you when the rogues broke through? Sierra was there, with a kitchen pan and more courage than half our warriors showed. Margot caught Sarah's eye from across the hall, gave the slightest nod of encouragement. You ask what we need? Marcus said coldly. We need an alpha who puts pack above obsession, who understands that one woman mate or not is not worth fracturing centuries of law. Then maybe, Callum said quietly, dangerously. Those laws need to fracture. The hall erupted. Voices rose in argument, some defending Callum, others shouting him down. Warriors moved to ready positions, uncertain which side would need defending. Marcus raised his hand for silence. When it finally fell, his expression was triumphant. You've made your position clear, Alpha King. Now we make ours. He looked at the other elders, received nods from 4 of the 7. By council vote, we reject your challenge. The trial continues under original terms. And if you interfere again, his smile was cold. We invoke the right of challenge. Sarah's blood ran cold. Even she knew what that meant. Any pack member could challenge the Alpha for leadership if the council supported it. Callum's expression didn't change, but she felt his fury through the bond like wildfire. You would threaten my position, he said softly. Over this? We would preserve our pack, Marcus replied. From an Alpha who's forgotten his purpose. Callum looked at Marcus for a long moment, then slowly scanned the hall. Sarah watched him take in the divided faces, the uncertainty, the fear. Watched him calculate odds and consequences. Finally, his eyes found hers across the distance. And she saw him make a choice. No, he said. Marcus frowned. No? You. I want me to choose between my pack and my mate. Between duty and the bond. Callum's voice was steady now, resolved. I refuse, because that choice is built on a lie, the lie that they're opposed. That caring for one means abandoning the other. He moved to the center of the circle, commanding every eye. My father ruled through fear, he continued. He believed power came from crushing anything that threatened his authority, and it nearly destroyed us. When I became Alpha King, I swore I would be different. Stronger, yes. But also better. More just. Justice demands, the female elder started. Justice demands we punish the guilty, not their descendants. Callum's gaze was fierce. Justice demands we acknowledge when our laws have become weapons of cruelty rather than tools of protection. And justice demands that I, as your Alpha, show you a better way. He turned fully toward Sierra, and the hall held its breath. Sarah, he said, and his voice carried every emotion he'd been holding back. Come here. The guards beside her tensed. She looked at Margot, who nodded slightly. Sarah walked forward on trembling legs, aware of hundreds of eyes tracking her movement. The collar burned with each step, but she kept her spine straight, her head high. When she reached Callum, he held out his hand. Taking it breaks the terms, she whispered. They'll end the trial. Let them, he said simply. I'm done playing by rules designed to break us both. Sarah looked at his outstretched hand, then at Marcus's furious expression, then back at Callum's steady gray eyes. She took his hand. The bond flared, singing through her blood like recognition, like coming home. Callum pulled her close, not touching beyond their joined hands, but close enough that she could feel his heartbeat. He could see the silver flecks in his eyes. You've forced a choice, he said to the council, his voice ringing clear. So here it is. I choose her. I choose the mate bond, and I choose to change the law. Marcus's face purpled. Then by the right of challenge. I invoke it myself, Callum said calmly. If you think pack law is more important than evolving with our circumstances, then challenge me for leadership. Prove your way is stronger. But know this, if I win, these old blood laws end. Forever. The hall erupted again, but this time Sierra barely heard it. She was staring at Callum, at the absolute certainty in his expression. He'd just bet everything. His crown, his pack, his life, on her. Are you insane? She breathed. Probably, he admitted, his lips quirking into something almost like a smile. But I'm done watching you suffer for laws I don't believe in. So now we fight. Together. Marcus's voice cut through the chaos. 3 days. The challenge will be held at the next full moon. And when you fall, Alpha King, pray that whoever takes your place is kinder to your mate than you deserve. The council stormed out, taking half the pack with them. Those who remained looked uncertain, afraid, but stayed nonetheless. Callum squeezed Sarah's hand once, then released it. Get her somewhere safe, he told Margot. This is about to get very ugly. As Margot led her away, Sarah looked back to see Callum standing alone in the center of the hall, surrounded by the fracture he'd just created, and she realized with stunning clarity that loving him might cost them both everything. The estate divided overnight. Sarah watched from her window as pack members chose sides, some moving their belongings to the west wing where Marcus held court, others remaining in the main house loyal to Callum. Families split, friendships shattered. The unity that had defined the Cresthaven pack for generations cracked down the middle, all because of her. Margot found her before dawn on the second day. He wants to see you. In the Alpha's study, Sarah's heart jumped. They'd barely spoken since the council. Callum consumed with preparing for the challenge, with trying to hold together what remained of his support. Is that wise? Wise left the building when he chose you over his crown. Margot's expression softened. But necessary? Yes. Come. The Alpha's study was a room Sarah had never entered. Dark wood, shelves of ancient texts, windows overlooking the forest. Callum stood at one, his back to the door, tension visible in every line of his body. Leave us, he said quietly. And Margot obeyed without question. Silence stretched between them. Sarah studied his reflection in the glass, the shadows under his eyes, the tightness around his mouth. He looked exhausted. You should rest, she said finally. The challenge is tomorrow night. I can't rest. He turned to face her, and the rawness in his expression made her breath catch. Every time I close my eyes, I see a dozen ways this ends badly. Marcus is strong, experienced, and he has something I don't absolute certainty that he's right. You have something he doesn't, Sarah countered. You're fighting for something worth saving, not just preserving something broken. Am I? The question was quiet, devastating. Half my pack has abandoned me. Sarah, warriors I've fought beside for years, people I've protected, led, bled for. They're choosing Marcus because they believe I've been compromised, that the mate bond has made me weak. Sarah moved closer, drawn by the bond and by something deeper, genuine care for this man who'd risked everything for her. Do you believe that? I believe. He stopped, jaw working. I believe that before you I was half alive, following rules without questioning them, leading without passion. I was a good Alpha King by every traditional measure, but I was empty inside. He crossed to her, stopping just close enough that she could feel his heat. Then you looked at me in that hall, he continued, voice rough, and something woke up. Something that terrified me, because suddenly all those certainties I'd built my life on felt hollow, and I had to choose, keep following the path I knew was wrong just because it was familiar, or risk everything for the chance to be something better. Callum, her voice cracked on his name. I need you to understand something. He raised his hand, hovering near her face but not quite touching. They'd learned to live in this aching, almost contact. If I lose tomorrow, Marcus will take leadership. And the first thing he'll do is finish what the Luna ceremony started. Ice flooded Sarah's veins. Then don't lose. I'm strong, but I'm not invincible. And if... He stopped, visibly struggling. If something happens to me, Margot has instructions. Money, a car waiting at the eastern border. You run, and you don't look back. No. The word came out fierce, surprising them both. I'm not running again. Sarah, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. She did touch him then. Consequences be damned. Her hand against his chest where his heart thundered. You've spent 2 weeks fighting for... me. If you think I'm going to run the moment things get dangerous, you don't know me at all. His hand covered hers, pressing it tighter against his heart. I know you're brave to the point of foolishness. I know you hit rogues with kitchen pans and defend children who've been taught to hate you. I know that somewhere in the last 2 weeks, keeping you alive stopped being about the mate bond, and became about he stopped. Became about what? Sarah whispered. About you. Just you. The impossible woman who makes me want to burn down centuries of tradition, if that's what it takes to keep you safe. The bond flared between them, no longer a separate thing but woven into whatever else was growing, something rawer, more real than fate's decree. Then fight, Sarah said. Tomorrow night, when you face Marcus, you fight with everything you have. Not for the mate bond, not for duty or tradition or pride. You fight because this, she gestured between them. Whatever this is becoming, it's worth fighting for. Callum's control finally snapped. He pulled her against him, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other wrapped around her waist. Not a kiss, they couldn't risk that. Not with elders watching for any excuse to declare him compromised, but an embrace that felt more intimate than anything Sarah had experienced. I'm terrified of losing you. He breathed against her hair. Then don't. They stood there, wrapped in each other, as the sun rose over the forest and painted the study in shades of gold. Sarah felt his heartbeat against hers, felt the bond humming contentedly at their proximity, felt something shift and settle into place. This wasn't just fate throwing them together anymore. This was choice. A knock at the door forced them apart. Margot entered, her expression grim. Forgive the intrusion, but you need to see this. She handed Callum a piece of torn fabric, and Sarah watched his expression darken with fury. What is it? She asked. Marcus's scent, Callum said quietly, dangerously. On rogue territory markers. The implication hung heavy in the air. Marcus hadn't just been opposing Callum politically. He'd been orchestrating the attacks, using rogues to destabilize the pack, to create fear and chaos that would make Callum look weak. He's been planning this for months, Margot said. Maybe longer, waiting for the right opportunity to challenge your leadership, and I gave it to him, Callum said, looking at Sarah. You were never the cause. You were the excuse he needed. What do we do? Sarah asked. We expose him, Margot said, before the challenge. Show the pack what he's done. No. Callum's voice was hard. If we accuse him without absolute proof, it looks like desperation. Like I'm trying to avoid the challenge. We need evidence no one can dispute. Then we have until tomorrow night to find it, Margot said. Callum nodded, then turned to Sarah. Stay with Margot. Don't go anywhere alone. If Marcus realizes we're investigating, I'll be careful, she promised. He looked at her like he wanted to say more, to do more, but couldn't. Instead, he simply held her gaze for a long moment, letting everything unsaid pass between them. Then he left to prepare for the fight of his life. Sarah touched the collar still burning at her throat and made her own promise to herself, to Callum, to whatever fate had bound them together. Tomorrow night, one way or another, this ended. Either they would expose Marcus and change the pack forever, or they would die trying. But she wouldn't let Callum face it alone. Outside the window, clouds gathered on the horizon, dark and heavy with the promise of storm. The full moon was rising, and with it, the reckoning they'd been racing toward since the moment their eyes met across a great hall filled with firelight and ancient hatred. The blood moon was coming, and it would demand answers written in sacrifice. The full moon rose blood-red over the fighting grounds. Sarah stood at the edge of the circle with Margot and the few pack members who'd remained loyal to Callum. The rest gathered on the opposite side, their faces hard with anticipation. They wanted this, wanted to see their alpha brought low, wanted proof that the mate bond had made him weak. The fighting grounds were ancient, packed earth, worn smooth by generations of challenges, surrounded by standing stones carved with the old language. Torches burned at intervals, casting dancing shadows that made the whole scene feel suspended between worlds. Marcus entered first, stripped to the waist, his body marked with ritual symbols. He moved with the confidence of someone who'd already won, who saw this as ceremony rather than true challenge. Then Callum appeared, and Sarah's breath caught. He wore nothing but loose pants, his chest bare, revealing the scars that mapped his history, some old and silver, others fresh from the rogue attacks. But it was his eyes that held her. When they found hers across the circle, she saw determination and fear and something that looked like goodbye. Don't you dare, she thought fiercely, willing him to feel it through the bond. Don't you dare give up. The female elder stepped into the center, her voice ringing out. By ancient right and council decree, this challenge is called. Marcus of the Cresthaven Pack contests Callum Ashford's right to lead. The victor claims alpha status. The defeated, she paused, is exiled or executed at the victor's discretion. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. Margot touched her shoulder in silent support. The challenge is fought in wolf form, the elder continued. First blood means nothing. Surrender means disgrace. Death means enough. Callum cut her off. His voice was steady, alpha authority ringing through every word. We all know the rules. Let's finish this. But he didn't move toward the center. Instead, he looked directly at Marcus. Before we begin, Callum said, I have something to... Show the pack. Marcus's expression flickered just for a second, uncertainty crossing his features. Margot stepped forward, holding up the torn fabric they'd found. This was discovered at a rogue den 3 miles from our border. It carries Marcus's scent, along with evidence of coordination, meeting times, attack patterns, pack vulnerabilities. The gathered wolves stirred, confusion spreading through both sides. Lies, Marcus said immediately. Desperate lies from an alpha who knows he's about to lose. Then explain this. Finn, the young guard from the forest, emerged from the crowd, carrying a leather journal. I found it in your quarters, Elder Marcus. Orders to the rogues. Plans to destabilize the pack. All in your handwriting. Sarah watched the crowd's energy shift, watched doubt creep into expressions that had been certain moments before. Marcus's face darkened with rage. You dare break into, I dared investigate when our Alpha King was accused unjustly, Finn said, his young voice strong. When Sarah was blamed for attacks you orchestrated. You've been planning this for months. Using rogues to make Callum look weak, waiting for the perfect excuse to challenge him. And I gave it to you, Callum said quietly. By choosing my mate over your approval. Marcus looked around at the gathered pack, saw the accusation building in their eyes, and something in him snapped. You're fools, all of you, blind to what's right in front of you. He pointed at Sarah. That woman is corruption given form. Her very existence breaks our laws. Your laws? Callum interrupted. Old laws built on fear and cruelty. Laws that punish children for their grandparents' choices. Laws that value tradition over justice. Justice? Marcus laughed, bitter and sharp. You call it justice to let heretic blood pollute our pack? To abandon centuries of tradition for one woman? I call it justice to judge people by their actions, not their ancestry. Callum moved into the center of the circle, power radiating from him. Sarah has done nothing but prove herself, work herself to bleeding, defend our children, and you repaid her with torture and condemnation. He turned slowly, addressing every wolf present. Marcus orchestrated the rogue attacks. He put our children in danger. He betrayed everything a pack member should be, and he did it to preserve laws even he won't follow. Because this isn't about tradition or blood debt. This is about power, about crushing anything that threatens his control. The crowd was listening now, really listening. Even wolves who'd sided with Marcus looked uncertain. So yes, Callum continued, the challenge stands. But let it be honest. Marcus wants my position because I'm changing things he once kept frozen. Because I'm choosing evolution over stagnation. Because I dared to say that the mate bond's something sacred. In every other circumstance matters more than his version of justice. He locked eyes with Marcus across the bond. Circle. You want to fight? Let's fight. But when I win, and I will win, these old blood laws end. Forever. No more punishing descendants for their ancestors' choices. No more cruelty disguised as tradition. We become the pack we should have been all along. And if you lose? Marcus asked. But his voice had lost its certainty. Then you get exactly what you want. Power, control, and a pack that never evolves past its worst impulses. Callum's smile was sharp as broken glass. But you won't win. Because I'm not just fighting for my position anymore. I'm fighting for something you've never understood. Hope for something better. The words hung in the air, heavy with promise and challenge. Marcus shifted first, a blur of motion, bones cracking, fur sprouting. His wolf was massive, gray and scarred, teeth bared in fury. Callum shifted a heartbeat later, his black wolf somehow larger, more primal. Silver-gray eyes locked onto Marcus with predatory focus. They circled each other as the pack held its collective breath. Then Marcus lunged. The fight was brutal and fast. They collided in a tangle of fur and fangs, power against power, experience against youth. Marcus fought with the desperation of someone who'd already lost everything that mattered. Reputation, trust, certainty. Callum fought with the focused intensity of someone protecting everything he loved. Sarah watched, unable to look away, feeling every impact through the bond like it landed on her own body. She felt Callum's pain when Marcus's teeth found shoulder, felt his determination when he threw the older wolf back, felt his rage when Marcus went for the throat, and missed. Callum's counter was devastating. He used Marcus's momentum against him, twisting mid-strike to slam the elder wolf into the ground. His jaws closed around Marcus's throat, not hard enough to kill, but hard enough to demonstrate absolute dominance. Marcus struggled, then went still. Submission. Callum held the position for 3 heartbeats, making sure every wolf present understood the hierarchy. Then he released Marcus and shifted back to human, breathing hard, blood streaming from multiple wounds. It's over, he said, his voice carrying despite the exhaustion. "The challenge is won. The old laws end tonight." He looked across the circle to where Sierra stood, and the bond between them sang with victory and relief and something that transcended both. Marcus shifted back, defeated and broken. "You've destroyed us," he said bitterly. "Opened us to weakness." "No," Margot said, stepping forward with the journal. "You did that when you allied with rogues, when you put personal power above pack safety. You're the traitor here, Marcus. And by our law, that demands exile." The elder's face went white. "You can't." "I can." Callum's voice was final. "Alpha will made manifest. You have until dawn to leave our territory. If you're found here after sunrise, the sentence is death." Marcus staggered to his feet, looked around at the pack he'd tried to control, and found no sympathy. Even wolves who'd supported him turned away, disgusted by the depths of his betrayal. He left without another word, disappearing into the darkness beyond the torches. Callum swayed slightly, blood loss catching up with him. Sarah broke from Margot's side and ran to him, catching him before he fell. "I've got you," she whispered. His arms came around her, and she felt him shake with exhaustion, with relief, with everything he'd been holding back. "It's over," he breathed against her hair. "It's over," she agreed. Around them, the pack slowly approached, some hesitant, some more certain, but all of them coming to kneel before their Alpha King, the one who'd fought not just for power, but for the right to choose love over law. And at Sierra's throat, the silver collar finally loosened its burning grip, the curse of old law beginning to fade in the face of new possibility. 3 months later, the collar was a memory, written in faint silver scars. Sierra traced them absently as she stood at the window of what had become their room, not the tower, not a prison, but the Alpha's quarters that Callum had insisted she share the day after the challenge. The forest stretched endlessly before her, painted in the gold and crimson of early autumn. Behind her, she heard him enter, felt the bond hum with contentment at his proximity. It still amazed her sometimes, how something that had felt like a curse had become the most natural thing in her world. "You're thinking too loud," Callum said, wrapping his arms around her waist and pulling her back against his chest. "I can feel it through the bond." "Good thoughts," she assured him, leaning into his warmth. "Just reflecting on how 3 months ago I was chained in a basement waiting to die. And now," she gestured at the room, at the life they'd built. "Now I'm helping Margot reorganize the pack's record-keeping system and teaching the younger wolves to read." "Now you're irreplaceable," he corrected, pressing a kiss to the scarred skin where the collar had burned. She shivered at the contact, the bond flaring with heat that had nothing to do with pain. "The pack elders, the new ones, actually asked for your input on the harvest planning yesterday. I noticed you failed to mention that would involve a 3-hour debate about grain storage." His laugh rumbled, through his chest into her back. "I thought you'd appreciate being included in the boring parts too. Proves you're really pack now." Pack. The word still felt strange and wonderful. After Marcus's exile, Callum had moved swiftly to restructure the council, replacing elders who'd supported the old ways with wolves who understood that tradition needed room to breathe and grow. The changes hadn't been easy. Some families had left, unable to accept the new direction, but most had stayed. And slowly, grudgingly at first, they'd begun to accept Sarah, not as the heretic's granddaughter, but as the woman who'd defended their children, who'd stood beside their Alpha through everything, who'd proven that bloodline mattered less than character. "The Luna ceremony is tomorrow night," Callum said quietly, and she felt tension creep into his shoulders. Sarah turned in his arms to face him. "Having second thoughts? About you?" "Never." His gray eyes held hers, intense and certain. "About making this public, formal, binding in front of the entire pack." He paused. "I just want you to be sure. Once we complete the ceremony, you're bound to this pack, to this life, forever. No going back." "Callum." She cupped his face between her hands, feeling the rough stubble, the warmth of his skin. "I stopped wanting to go back the moment you chose to fight for me instead of against me. Maybe even before that. This us, it stopped being about the mate bond weeks ago." "When?" he asked, something vulnerable in his expression. "When did it become real for you?" Sarah thought back through the past 3 months, the quiet moments learning to navigate the bond's constant presence, the nights he'd held her through nightmares about silver and altars, the morning she'd woken to find him watching her sleep with such tenderness it had stolen her breath, the 1,000 small choices they'd made to build something lasting from the wreckage of fate's violent introduction. "I think," she said slowly, It became real when I realized I wasn't just grateful you'd saved my life. I was furious at the thought of losing you, when Marcus had you pinned in that fight. And I felt genuine terror not for myself but for you. That's when I knew. Knew what? That this wasn't just destiny throwing us together anymore. That I was choosing you. Every day, every moment. She smiled. Even when you're being an overbearing alpha who thinks 3-hour grain debates are appropriate courtship. He kissed her then, slow and deep, the bond singing between them like music. When they broke apart, both breathing harder, his forehead rested against hers. Tomorrow, he said, in front of the pack, I'm going to officially claim you as my mate and my Luna. Everyone will see. Everyone will know. You'll have a target on your back for the rest of your life from anyone who still believes in the old ways. I already have that target, Sarah pointed out. At least this way, I get the title and the authority to go with it. You're not afraid? Terrified, she admitted, but not of being your Luna, of failing the pack, of not being enough. You're more than enough. His voice was fierce. You're everything. And tomorrow, the pack will recognize what I've known since the moment I caught your scent, that you're exactly where you're meant to be. That night, they lay tangled together in the massive bed, the bond humming contentedly in the quiet. Sarah traced the scars on Callum's chest, some from the challenge, others from the work of rebuilding that had followed. Tell me about her, she said softly. The one you were promised to before. She felt him tense, then deliberately relax. Elena, she was good, kind, everything a Luna should be, according to the elders. Did you love her? I cared for her, respected her. But love? He was quiet for a long moment. I didn't know what that word meant until you. Elena and I would have had a functional partnership. We would have led the pack well together, but it would have been duty, not... He stopped. Not this, Sarah finished. Not this, he agreed. Not something that feels like breathing, like coming home, like the best and most terrifying thing that's ever happened to me. She kissed his chest, right over his heart. Tomorrow, when we stand in front of the pack. Tomorrow, he interrupted. You become Luna. You become mine in every way that matters. And I become yours. Completely. Irrevocably. I'm already yours, she whispered. I have been since you chose to fight for me instead of killing. Then tomorrow we just make it official. His arms tightened around her. And every day after, we prove that the old ways were wrong. That love is stronger than law. That choosing each other was the best decision either of us ever made. Sarah fell asleep wrapped in his warmth, the bond pulsing steadily between them like a second heartbeat. The next evening, as the full moon rose over the great hall once more, she stood beside Callum wearing Luna white instead of chains. The pack gathered larger now, stronger, united in ways they hadn't been in generations. When Callum took her hand and spoke the ancient words that bound them officially, Sarah felt the bond snap into place fully, no longer tentative but absolute. She was pack. She was Luna. She was his, and he was hers. As the pack howled their approval and the moon blessed their union, Sarah looked at Callum, her mate, her alpha, her choice, and knew that every moment of pain, every trial, every impossible choice had led to this, to love that had been forged in fire and blood, to a future they would build together, to a bond that had started with fate but had become something far more powerful, something they'd chosen, fought for, and would defend for the rest of their lives. The Luna ceremony ended not with blood on an altar, but with a kiss that sealed their promise. And the wolf that had always lived dormant in Sarah's blood finally woke, called forth by love and acceptance, and the absolute certainty that she had finally found where she belonged.